Welcome to the Black Hat edition of CyberBytes the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. I got to sit down with Brian Kenyon, Chief Strategy Officer at Island. Brian is an industry veteran, having previously been CTO at McAfee, and has partnered up again with Michael Fey and Dan Amiga on their enterprise browser product. Brian is an extremely humble chap who's clearly very passionate about changing the way enterprises use the browser in a secure and productive way.
And we're on.
Thank you.
Brian Kenyon, Chief Strategy Officer at Island. How are you, mate?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All good. When did you get in?
Well, I've been here a little bit, so we got here Friday, the week before.
Well, you're looking well, mate. I met somebody you know yesterday at our social hour, Simon Hunt.
Absolutely.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he was CTO at McAfee. We met Simon through the acquisition of a company he was founder of, SafeBoot. Full disk encryption. Yeah.
I asked him for any interesting facts about you because I told him we're speaking. Do you know what he said?
No, what did he say?
He said that you can play a lot of instruments.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good one. I can't believe he remembers that. Yeah.
What exactly can you play?
Well, I grew up playing trumpet and a lot of brass instruments, and then it just kind of grew out from there. I don't do any of it now.
No?
Now I just help build software.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, let's dive straight into it. Your background, if you can give the audience a little bit of an idea of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm in I guess it's my 23rd, 24th year in cyber. Started at a small startup called Foundstone. And that's probably most well known because less about what Foundstone did, which was in the vulnerability management space, and more about who the actual leaders of the company were. I mean, you got George Kurtz, who went and started CrowdStrike. You got Kevin Mandia, who obviously went and started Mandiant, now part of Google. You have Stuart McClure, who went and started Silence, and that became part of BlackBerry. You got Nish and Rohit, who went and started, I think it's called Cofense now, but it was FishMe. And so you just had such a significant amount of cyber expertise running around that organization and a lot of serial entrepreneurs that it was a very interesting start to a career in cyber. And then over the next couple decades, I spent time at McAfee, Blue Coat, Symantec, so some larger manufacturers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's obviously you and Michael have worked together in the past.
Yeah. So our CEO, Mike, and I, we met at McAfee in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so he was coming in as part of the new management team, rebuilding and getting McAfee out of its stock option scandals and everything else. And he and I met on that journey, and it's been the better part of 2 decades together.
How's that been? Obviously, sort of following each other, and has that been starting Island?
Well, I think starting Island was not anything he and I probably would have, sketched out on paper. But, as we worked at a company called Blue Coat, which was focused on the proxy space, moved into Symantec, Mike made an M&A transaction with a company called Fireglass, which Dan Amiga was one of the co-founders and CTO. And so Mike and Dan got to build a really great relationship with the remaining time that we spent at Symantec. And so when Dan approached Mike in 2020 with the concept of this idea, and Mike and I started talking, and the three of us started talking, it was very clear that this was something we had to do.
When you talk about an idea, it just seems such an obvious thing, but it's new, and it is. What did inspire where did the idea come around, and what inspired it?
Well, Dan, so this is Dan through and through. I mean, he had been spending the better part of a decade building the remote browser isolation platform, which was nothing more than Chromium in the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. So it was just Chromium running it at a hypervisor and, providing and painting the pixels of a user's browser screen on their local compute. So after 10 years of doing that, working with engineers, Dan really saw the opportunity to take the principles of what remote browser isolation was and build on them into a new, completely different capability, which was not just about protecting the browser against malicious activity on the web. It was looking at the way in which we were applying and deploying security controls across the enterprise and the complexity and cost that we were incurring, because all we were trying to do was really get control back of what users were doing in the web and what they were doing in web applications and what they were doing in the browser. And so it really became a remarkable opportunity to rethink that entire architecture and that entire capability of what security looks like when it's driven natively in the browser itself.
Yeah, nice. Let's get an overview of Ireland. How would you explain it?
So the easiest way to think about us, right, is the problem set that Island's made its entire mission has been to help organizations get control back of work, and specifically work that's happening in the browser. And the way we look at this, and the way we've been talking to companies for the better part of almost 4 years now, is the browser is one of the last pieces of our infrastructure that ended up there almost accidentally. It was innocuous. It came in Windows with the Internet Explorer, Mac had Safari. People used it to shop and pay bills and buy things on their lunch break and in between, meetings and stuff. And that's how we governed it. That was what we cared about. We wanted to make sure you couldn't get to a malicious site. We wanted to make sure you couldn't get to a bad HR category that would create a hostile work environment or create some sort of bad feelings. But work wasn't being done there. So we didn't worry about data protection. We didn't worry about encryption. We didn't worry about the things that we now do. And so over the last decade, more and more work has been coming in and out of the browser. And yet it's still that same consumer framework, that same consumer features that we're using. And so what we saw was the opportunity to take the modern browser, which is built off of Chromium, and purpose-built and design one that solves complex cyber challenges for organizations.
Got some use cases for us? Or?
Yeah, I think we're at about 100 customers today, slightly over, and growing very aggressively. And what's unique about that is when you see what the platform can actually do and just how much that control can truly be manifest, you see a lot of the use cases we're solving. So probably one of the biggest ones is around the concept of unmanaged devices. So that is something we've been fighting in cyber for decades, right? Contractors, BYOD employees, non-integrated employees, NIEs, I think you hear now. All these folks need to get secured access, and we want to be able to govern it. And the only way we've been able to do this securely is with really thick solutions like VDI, desktop as a service, that are costly, complex, nobody likes the user experience. So having a browser that's purpose-built, that's completely instrumented, that just installs just like any other browser, is a very viable and light way to get control over that. The other thing that we've been helping organizations do is get control around users that represent a disproportionate amount of risk. So I'll give you a great example, call centers. So you got a lot of call centers, whether it's a credit card company, mortgage company, whether it's a retail company. You have these call centers that have to interact with their customers, with their data, with their credit cards, with their info. How do you do that in the most secure way possible when most of those call centers aren't in an office anymore? They're working from home, they're working from their couch, they're working from a Chromebook or something else. And so we've been able to provide a really closed loop system and tight controls around that user and how they interact with data.
It's obviously a new category. There's a couple of other players coming up. What are you doing so differently to your competitors?
So I think there's a couple things that we've learned throughout the journey that has changed not only our philosophy, but our entire approach in what we're doing and building. And one of the biggest things we learned was, obviously, we started off Island thinking about the capabilities from a cyber perspective. How could you deliver DLP better in the browser? How could you do privileged access management? How could you do isolation and some of these other capabilities? But once we really started getting deployed across the customer, we saw opportunities to change really two other main constituents. One of those is just kind of think of your general IT teams to begin with. Network services, end user computing, end user productivity. These are classic IT roles that have really had very little to do with security. But there's real capabilities we can deliver directly from the browser. An example of that is we built our own Zero Trust Network Act. So now we can route traffic directly from the browser without a VPN or another agent. We built our own enterprise password manager. So now we can help organizations centrally deploy and manage password managers and what passwords can be saved and the complexity of them and all those great variables. We built a digital experience module. We've built MDM tools directly in the browser to help with those unmanaged devices and getting those. And so we're building not just for cyber now, but now we're building to more of a general IT capability around what can a cooperative browser do better for me in my environment than I'm doing today. And then the last constituent that we've learned is probably one of the most important pieces in this puzzle, is the end user themselves. And if you think about this, right, there's very little difference today between Chrome, Edge, Brave, and Opera when it comes to not browsing YouTube or interacting on Meta. But when you go to ServiceNow or Salesforce or SharePoint, there's not a lot of programmatic differences between those browsers. So at Island, we saw a really remarkable opportunity to start building in features and capabilities that speak to the productivity of the employee and the end user doing their jobs in those apps. So we built in our own copy and paste buffer so they can store up the last 50 things they copied and pasted instead of the same one in, one out you and I have used for decades. We built a PDF editor so they can manage PDFs directly right in. We have a lot of IT power users leveraging Island. So we built RDP and SSH directly in. We built ad blockers. We're going to build in cybersecurity awareness training so if they click a bad link or end up on a bad site, they get the training right there of things they should do. So we're building in a ton of capability across all three of those constituencies.
Yeah, nice. As the Chief Strategy Officer, what is the future for Island?
Well, there's a lot of things we probably are, well down the path on delivering. But I think one thing stands out, and it's standing out really clearly at this show right now, which is what is the role of security and IT with generative AI? As we look at these new capabilities, as we look at harnessing this power in our corporations, what does that mean for us, and how do we need to better protect ourselves, and how do we get visibility? And the answer for us has always been the operating system. We install DOS, we install an agent, we install DLP, we install encryption. That's how we get it. AI doesn't intersect with the operating system. ChatGPT doesn't install locally. Neither does any of the generative AIs. In fact, they're URLs that you browse to, or they're extensions that you put in the browser. So the browsers become that new OS that we have to intersect. And so one of the things we've been talking about this show, and one of the things our CTO Dan's been really working hard on, is building in a policy engine for the consumption of AI. So if you're a user and you want to generate copy, you want to go and pull contract language that some AI generated for you, you want to go get source code, the organization may want to get their hands on that before it gets released to you as a user. They may check it into their CI/CD. They may want to run it through Black Duck. They may want to take that contract language and put it in a repository where the general counsel can look at it. And they're going to definitely want to know if it was you or me, so that then they can trace back, where did Brian take that data? Where did he reuse in our org? Does it introduce any risk for us? Giving that power and that visibility back is really the opportunity of Island, because you're not going to do it anywhere else.
Yeah. Who's this for? In terms of an ideal, is there an ideal customer profile, or is it? Because for me, this seems like it's for everybody.
I will tell
everyone should be having this.
If we've learned one thing in our journey so far, is the makeup of our 100 customers and more is completely different. We have shops that are 200 users. We have a shop that's 600,000 users. We have retail and financial services and healthcare, which are obviously heavily regulated, and you would expect they take cyber seriously. But then we have just as many manufacturers and high-tech companies and other, verticals that just aren't necessarily what you would consider an early adopter. But there's so much value and there's so much efficiency that organizations can get from this that we're seeing it across the board.
Yeah, nice. And for folks that are interested in coming to join Island, what attributes and skills are you looking for for talent who might be interested in joining?
I love it. So we're looking for innovators. We're looking for people who are being disruptive. And at Island, we're not being disruptive just in the technology. We're being disruptive in everything we do. We think about every bespoke layer of execution. We ask ourselves, are we being delivered in that? Do we know why we're doing this? Do we know why our logo looks the way it looks and the swag we wear looks the way it looks? And is that the most efficient way for us to go? So everything from sales to our SEs to our marketing teams are being asked to not only innovate in message and what we do, but innovate how they deliver their job. It goes back to that Gen AI stuff, right? Like if you're not leveraging that as a sales rep, as a marketing professional, you're letting others get by. And so we're looking for people who innovate. We're looking for people who are passionate. We're looking for people who want to create the future.
Brian, I wish you all the best of success.
Thank you very much,
brother, and thanks for coming on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.